everyone. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Dave Swinson. Dave is a novelist. He's written 5 novels, including the Frank Marr mystery series. And you and I first met in 2016 at BoucherCon, which is that's the biggest book conference for thrillers and mystery books, right? That's the
It's
that's the
going on
big
now.
one.
Yeah, and I don't remember what city that was in. New Orleans?
Yeah, it was in New Orleans. But
Okay.
so I was having my first novel published by Mulholland, who has published all of
Yeah,
your
same.
books, and
Hmm.
I was totally lost there. I was not having any fun, and I wound up connecting with you, and you and I were, having beers at some awards ceremony up in the balcony. And then we wound up
Hmm.
spending, so much of that weekend together. I mean,
Yeah, and the award ceremony was with Josh Kendall, our
yeah,
editor, and then also Reagan Arthur, who's the actual. Well, she's not the publisher of Little Brown anymore. She's the publisher of Knopf.
I
But
loved Reagan.
yeah, Reagan was way
She's
cool. Is way
she's a lot of
cool.
fun.
Yeah,
But you and
yeah.
I wound up hanging out so much, and I was like, we're
Hmm.
going to be brothers. And then I
Hmm.
never saw you again until now. Until
Yeah, I
literally
know, it's
15
weird.
minutes ago.
Yeah, no, it's weird how that works. You never went back to another. I never saw you at another BoucherCon, and then obviously COVID
Yeah.
hit, and there were no BoucherCons. And the BoucherCon's going on now in Minneapolis. It's happening right
Oh,
now.
okay. And you didn't go.
No, no, because um, I don't have a book, and I will have a book for
Oh,
2023
okay.
called Sweet Thing. And so my Josh Kendall said, "It's perfect. You go to the BoucherCon in 2023 because they'll actually have galleys of my new book."
Okay, nice. Well, so I was rereading some of your stuff. I'd read one of your books years ago, and I was rereading the first book you ever wrote, and it's some dark stuff. Just to
Wait, a detailed man?
no, I was reading Second Girl.
Oh, the
Yeah,
second
and
girl.
I
Yeah.
just so in the opening 30 pages, an ex-cop who's a drug addict robs some
Hmm.
drug dealers, finds a woman tied up in their house,
Hmm.
rescues her, uses some drugs to even himself out while he's doing it, and then goes back and winds up murdering one of the drug dealers
By
by
accident.
accident. But I,
Yeah.
but
No, he's not a
but it's
murderer.
funny because it's
Yeah.
it's dark, but then it's also there's a side of it that's not ugly, right? It's not
Hmm.
that ugly darkness. It's I don't know. I get very much you when I read the book.
Hmm. Well, I'm not a drug addict, but I mean, Frank Marr was like quietly retired after he pissed dirty. And, that is actually common. It's happened before. It's happened in the FBI. It's happened a lot of places because what happens is if the FBI one became public years ago, because what happens is if you can imagine every defense attorney learning that you use cocaine or
Right.
heroin and you piss dirty, they will all line up and every case is going to get thrown out of court. I mean, not out of court. Every a prisoner is going to be
Mm-hmm.
released, based on your unreliability. So that's the premise of Frank Marr. So he's sort of like a good bad guy or a bad good guy.
I think he's a good guy.
Librarians, 70-year-old librarians love him, so he can't be that
Yeah,
bad.
I thought he seemed like a very good guy.
Yeah, I
I don't know. I
like
thought it
him.
was interesting. It was dark, but it never crossed over into that kind of being sordid or ugly. You know what I mean? I thought that
Yeah,
was very powerful.
thank you.
So I'm curious. So you were a police officer. You were
I was a detective, a police officer, and then I went up through there's two rank. two ways you can go. You can go command, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, commander. I chose investigative, so I went in a plain clothes and then investigator. Then I made detective and got assigned into. I developed a niche and became very specialized, and then ended up in intelligence section, and then major crimes, and then eventually ended my career. Not ended like
Mm-hmm.
that, but in high intensity drug trafficking, working with ATF and DEA.
That seems to be the toughest part of police work, isn't it? Right. I think the public thinks it's homicides, but that's investigative. Whereas with the drugs, you're actively combating these people.
Some investigations were. Well, no, some of my investigations lasted 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And they became RICO and conspiracy in federal court, where you had multiple defendants, and so it was highly specialized. I'm not diminishing homicides. I mean, I've been involved in several homicides, more in the assisting capacity because of my knowledge of certain things, and when I was in major crime. So I was involved in some high-profile homicides. But and I went to homicide school, and the chief actually teased me. He personally gave me my Chief Ramsey. He knew I wanted to be where I wanted to be. I did not want to be in homicide, but I went to homicide school thinking I would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then he teased me, gave me my detective badge. He goes, "Swinson, homicide." And I go, "Okay, sir." And he goes, "Nah, I'm kidding. You're back where you are." I was so thankful, because I did not want to be in homicide. I just decided, it's just like, it's grueling. Those guys, and they're so many of them are my friends who I'm still in touch with. And I call, you have your guy. Do you have a guy that you call when you're like stuck on a procedural thing, or you just, or you just wing it, or you already know it?
I don't have a guy, but I typically reach out to someone.
Yeah, I have a guy. I have a gal. I have people. And,
I wish I had that.
In the U.S. Attorney's Office, and homicide and stuff, and in narcotics, because things have changed. I mean, now in drugs and stuff, that there's new drugs on the street. It's not like it was when I was on the department.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to, like, if I'm writing something, my new book takes place in 1999, so I don't need so much help. But Frank Marr was more current, and so things changed. And so it was always someone I would reach out to, and it was so cool that they were always so helpful.
Something I noticed in the book is you're very detailed with locations. So he lives on 12th in Florida, in Washington, D.C., which is right near Howard University, which is a beautiful area. I went to...
Now it is. Yeah.
Oh, was it, I went to college there, and I used to drive, all through Washington, D.C., and I was always surprised how there were just these little pockets of it that just had these amazing little neighborhoods. And
yeah, Adams Morgan.
Yeah, and it was like you just wander in there, and there'd just be 5 blocks of just this peaceful little neighborhood or some cool neighborhood, and then you'd be off to something else. But I
in 2 blocks.
Yeah, exactly. And but I found it very interesting that you're so detailed in those places. Do you not like, I hate making up places. I only want to write about places I've seen with my own eyes. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, me too.
Is that the same for you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where did you go to college?
I went to Georgetown.
Can you say that? Oh, you went to Georgetown. Yeah, I have several friends that went there.
I graduated in 02.
And yeah, 02. Those areas you're talking about, 14th and U, 12th in Florida, there were a lot of the row homes on 12th in Florida were shells and abandoned, and crackheads went in there and slept and did their crack. And right around the corner, you could buy crack or heroin and stuff. And so that was the whole premise with Frank Marr, is he bought a place that was a shell in a bad time, and now those homes are worth $1.5 million.
Yeah, interesting.
But back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you could get I really wish I was smart enough to have invested, and I just didn't want to. But
It's tough.
Yeah, but Adams Morgan was always cool,
Yeah.
right there on 18th Street.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You were describing the drug dealers running certain corners there, and it's funny.
17th.
I could see it happening there, but I've never remotely been aware of that. Right? Anytime I've been,
Yeah, it's funny. You really won't. It's like just like they know. If I were to walk, and I rarely wore a suit when I was in major crimes, but when I was a district detective, I did. Obviously they knew I was a detective. But when I was in plain clothes, I didn't really look like a cop. But, a lot of times they had to have a spidey sense of who is a cop, just like we have a spidey sense of who is a bad guy or gal, So it's sort of, I wish I was like, what's the word? Clueless. Because I can go to DC now and I can just see things, that I don't, I go, oh, that guy, that gal, whatever. And it's just like, I don't want to see that.
That's interesting. So when you're walking around, you do find yourself, when you're a cop, obviously you're experiencing a totally different side of the city from the rest of us. And do you find that when you walk around, it doesn't look the same to you? You can't.
Well, now it's not the same. It's totally gentrified, but so it's a little more difficult to spot. They're doing things differently.
But before, you could kind of see maybe someone was up to something.
Oh my gosh, it was so easy. 1600, 1700 block of Columbia Road. You had the South Side run by certain Latino gang. You had the North Side run by another Latino gang. You had, I could just name places. 14th and U, which my dad was foreign service, so I was DC was always home base, and I went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, which was called Western in Georgetown.
Oh, I know that school. I used to walk by there all the time. Yeah. There's a giant chair or something.
Giant chair. I used to sit under that chair and have lunch.
Oh, nice.
With my girlfriend at the time, and I think I was one of maybe 5 Caucasian guys in the school. And it was fantastic. It was a great art school, theater, music, not so much math.
Right.
I know you're really probably into that, doing what you do, but
I hate math. It's so boring. It's interesting when it's connected to something useful, but I sucked at math as a student. I could not.
Did you really? Because I thought you're in like finances.
Yeah, but it's simple math. And there it's numbers, but it's the math itself is very easy. And the numbers have significance. They carry great significance. It's not just some disembodied math problem. It's not calculus or anything crazy. It's just adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, and that's it.
I think I got a D in calculus. I barely passed.
It's boring. It's boring.
Yeah.
I would always just check out the whole semester, and then the final exam, I just cram and use my memory. I wouldn't even actually know what I was doing, but I have a good memory, and I just somehow put it together and get an okay grade.
Well, I was a film grad, so I didn't really care about math. Yeah. I just needed to do well and all the other stuff.
But so what got you? So you were a police officer, and then what got you into? Well, actually, weren't you at one point? Were you connected to the music scene? Like punk or alternative?
Punk, alternative, college. I had 2 venues after I graduated, Cal State, Long Beach, and I met a girl. She was into the scene and got me into the scene. I didn't dress the part or anything like that, but I loved the music. And I'm talking about hardcore punk, alternative. Like Social Distortion, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Violent Femmes, Adolescence.
Those are some good bands.
Minor Threat, Fugazi, all that stuff. And I noticed that there were a lot of kids who were really displaced and really into the scene, and they were young kids, and the only place they could go is like Orange County, and they didn't have cars, or Hollywood, to see a show. And Long Beach, California had nothing. So I found my first venue was called Fender's Ballroom. It held 1,500 people. I think my first show, I'm pretty sure my first show was Violent Femmes, and packed it. I mean, gosh, it was all ages, so it was just crazy. And I stayed at Fender's for 3 years, and then found a place called Bogart's Nightclub, which was top 40, and a meat market, literally top 40 meat market where everyone was going there to pick up girls or guys.
Mm-hmm.
And coincidentally, it's now on the West Coast. They don't have they have Safeway, but the grocery stores are like Ralph's.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, it's in the meat section of a Ralph's now. But that became my popular spot, and I booked 6 days a week. And you name them, I booked them. And everyone from the Pixies to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds to B.B. King. Evenings of Conversation on Wednesday with Hunter S. Thompson, Timothy Leary, John Waters. It was so much fun.
That's really cool. So wait, I'm curious. Now you mentioned you met a girl through there. Did you meet a lot of girls? I mean, that seems like a great...
After we broke up, I can count the girls I've been with on like two hands. I mean, I always I wasn't like a player or anything like that. I had girlfriends and relationships and stuff.
Yeah. But there's some you're with and some you're a little bit with. It's a continuum.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't really, I don't want to lie. I mean, yeah, there was. But I think there was only one time I met a girl at a bar, picked her up, and that was the only time. It was terrible. So I hated it. But all the girls I met were, through friends or at the club and stuff like that. And there's still, many of them are like still friends with me now. We communicate. Good friends.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I came of age in the internet age where, I met my wife on Match.com.
Oh my gosh.
And that was back when you didn't tell anybody, so we just wouldn't bring it up. And I had a friend who I think lied and said that he had a one-night stand and woke up next to the woman who eventually became his wife. And he made that story up just to cover up the fact that they met on Match.com.
Oh, jeez.
That's my theory. But but so you were in that scene, and then how do you go from that scene to being a cop? That's a pretty big change.
Well, I grew up. My dad was in the Foreign Service, but Foreign Service. We grew up in sensitive countries.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he wasn't in the Foreign Service, and he was a CID and Army, and he always wanted to be a detective. And I grew up where he would always read me like Graham Greene and Raymond Chandler, all this stuff, and I would have dreams of becoming a cop, a detective, and, since I was 16, and I always wanted to do that. But first and foremost, at 17, I knew I was going to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote my first book at 17 and got my first rejection at 18. And it devastated me. And then, it was a natural segue, one thing into the other. After I left Bogart's in 1989, and my assistant, Steve Zepeda, took over Bogart's, and it lasted till 1991. And I got with a friend who had a 16-millimeter camera. He did some really great stuff with some punk rock bands for music videos. And then we got with a company and started, I was the producer, he was a director. We did a lot of music videos for MTV,
mm-hmm.
including, Ozzy Osbourne with, Bill Ward and a lot of really cool people. And then through my connections at Bogart's, Timothy Leary and a guy named Bill Stanky, who's still a very, very famous manager and responsible for a lot of reality TV shows right now.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Timothy Leary's house and came up with an idea, along with the guy I was doing music videos with, called Roadside Prophets. And I was afraid to write it. I wanted to be a screenwriter, but I was afraid to write it because had so many rejections. So I hired a girl named Abby Wool who co-wrote Sid and Nancy. And,
oh, wow.
I was afraid to produce it myself, so I got a hold of Sid, her friend, Peter McCarthy, who produced Repo Man and Get You Sucker and all these great stuff. And we ended up getting a deal at New Line Cinema. And then through Hunter S. Thompson, I got the rights with his ex-girlfriend, Layla Nabulsi, for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And in 1989-90, we tried to get it made by everybody, and everybody turned it down. And I got so fed up. I just said, I want a pension. I want insurance. I don't want to be an independent producer, getting money, wasting money, losing money. So I decided to apply. It was when to the to home base, a DC Police Department. I got accepted, and when I was in the academy, Layla finally got Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas made through Johnny Depp, and I was so happy. I wasn't jealous. I was so happy that it got made. Mm-hmm. But I never wanted to go back to film. I always thought I'd be a cop just for a short period of time and just hone my skills in writing and just learn about crime, because crime fiction is what I've always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But the years passed, and all of a sudden, I'm retiring, and then, then I write a book called The Detailed Man, which got rejected by everybody, and got published by a small San Francisco press, and is now being reissued. January 30th, it'll be out by a very great independent press. And then The Second Girl, and my agent got me a 3-book deal with Mulholland and Will Brown. So I was very, very lucky, but it was not overnight. I had been doing it for years.
That's terrific. So, but I'm curious, so you connected first with detective fiction through your dad, and mm-hmm. then your dad was doing mm-hmm. something where, he's in the Foreign Service, he's, doing something where he's either gathering intel or...
Yeah.
Do you think he was gathering intel or doing stuff operationally?
He was not. He was... I found documents, and because when he retired, and I got his apartment in Washington, D.C., because it was I lived with him there for a long time and went to high school. Mm-hmm. So I was on the lease. So when he left, I came back from California, and I stayed with him through the academy. Then he retired, and he moved to Minnesota, northern Minnesota. He left documents behind. I found certain things that just, where a colonel would write them, and say, "Oh, you old spook, I found you." You don't call a Foreign Service officer a spook,
right? Oh, that's interesting.
Unless they're a spy, So I'm sort of calling my dad out, but he's 95, and no one knows where he is. He's sort of like in a very reclusive area of northern Minnesota.
Right, he's in Grumpy Old Man right now. He's ice fishing or something.
He can protect, and he can protect himself.
So I'm curious. So you first connected to it, through fiction, and then, you actually were a cop, and then you wound up, returning to the writing. I'm curious why it's very hard to write a book. My opinion is nobody writes a book because they want to; they do it because they have to. Mm-hmm. And for you, is that the case for you, and why? Why'd you have to?
It's always been the case. For A Detailed Man took 10 years to write because I was working. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wouldn't come home for 3 days. When 911 hit, I was not home for a long time. And I was married at that time. I'm divorced now, but I was married. But I was always writing, even on the force. And there were only certain things you could write about. You could never break general orders and give up certain procedure, talk about real cases, mm-hmm. Real names. That's borderline stupid. You're going to get you fired. So everything was total fiction, but it was based on experiences, but not things that actually happened. I mean, the death I saw, all that is based on, what I saw, how I could describe it, and the drug addicts, and that's how I got to know. Well, actually, I got to know a lot about drugs with Hunter S. Thompson. He was the epitome of coke addict, and sort of like, not sort of, I mean, Frank Marr is an homage to Hunter S. Thompson because Hunter wanted to be a sheriff of Woody Creek, Aspen or Woody Creek?
I think it's Woody Creek.
Yeah, he wanted to be a sheriff. And I had imagined, what if he never was an author and he was a detective in D.C.? What would he be like? And I'm thinking he would frickin' be Frank Marr, totally breaking the rules, So, yeah, and the grapefruit is an obvious homage to Hunter.
That's funny because when I was reading the book, I kept you were mentioning the grapefruits, and it made me think of Fear and Loathing.
Yeah, but he even told me personally that he would always on his writer when he would come speak for a speaking engagement. I would book through Bill Stanky, who was managing him. He always on his writer was a bottle of Chivas. Maybe 2 bottles of Chivas and grapefruit, because he swore that that's what was keeping him alive.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, he probably needed the vitamin C.
Yeah, but you know what? Grapefruit interferes with vitamins. It interferes with certain vitamins. It interferes with medications. It really is not as beneficial as people think.
Oh, that's so God knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I don't know. It was
just screwing him up even more.
Yeah, he was a character, and I loved him. And the amount of time I've known him, you could put into hours in the few years. But in those hours, several hours that I knew him, he really influenced me.
Oh, interesting. Did you find you could
Did
you find you could actually talk to him, or was he so much the character of Hunter S. Thompson that you didn't get it?
He's very much Hunter S. Thompson, and I swear, the first time I picked him up at the airport, and I rented a red convertible.
Right?
Because of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he loved that. First thing he said when he hopped off this plane is, "Where's the bar? Where's the bar?" And I go, "Huh? Bar, I gotta get a bar." I go, "Well, we've got to get back. The show starts in 2 hours, and I'd like to get you situated in your hotel and all that." Because he had to stay at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And, I said, and then we have to drive 45 minutes. And he goes, "No, bar." He goes, "I know the Redondo Beach. Go to." Then we're in a sports bar drinking for like an hour and a half. And then there's no cell phones, and
he's got you drinking too.
Oh my gosh, he's got me drinking. And so we're both plastered. And then I got a payphone. I called Bogarts, and they're going, "Where the hell are you?" And I go, "I can't get him to leave." And they go, "There is a line around the block. We have to have a second show." I mean, and the show was early, so there was a second show added. So I said, "There's 2 shows." He goes, "What? But he sort of spoke not like a different language, but it's like, how you meet someone that has such a thick accent, it takes you a while to really understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's like that with him. But then eventually, after a few hours, you totally understand. But in the beginning, you're just going, "Okay, yeah, I don't know what the hell you're saying."
Was he a nervous guy? Was that why? It's funny. All writers are drinkers.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean alcoholics. I mean, or anything like that. But I mean, they like to drink. Most of the people I know who are good at writing like to drink, and not that they drink every day or every week or anything like that, but they like to drink. And
I enjoy bourbon, scotch.
I mean, I love to drink. I don't drink every day or every week. I don't really drink much in the winter, but I love to drink. I have so much fun drinking. It connects you with people.
What's the winter? What does a winter have to do with
No,
it?
because we drink a lot around the holidays.
Oh, okay.
My wife loves it when she can get me drinking. She's like if I ever am like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna drink, she's like, come on, like don't go too far. She
I
gets
remember my wife was like that. Yeah. So I'd get together with friends, and he'd bring a bottle of bourbon, and next thing you know, and we lived on 11 acres, and he would always bring his ATV. And two guys drinking bourbon on an ATV,
this
driving around your property. It's a little crazy.
this is you and Hunter.
No, me and my friend in
Oh,
Virginia.
okay.
No, not Hunter. Are you kidding? No, we didn't. But we did have some excursions and some Fear and Loathing in Long Beach.
That's awesome.
There was this girl who was a very good friend of mine. I actually had a big crush on. She was so gorgeous. I said, you're coming with me to, not the first time, but the second time. You're coming with me to pick up Hunter because you can control him. I know you can control him. Because, she'd help with the stage and stuff with the musicians, and she was so good with them. She was young. She was maybe 20, 21, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe younger, maybe 19, and getting in illegally. But she could totally, Hunter loved her. I mean, totally loved her, and not like that. I mean, he just liked her a lot. He had a girlfriend.
Right.
But, so she was very good at being able to get him to, go to the show. Like, at that time we were doing another show at Redondo Beach at another club called the Belly Up. But, and then 2 times at Bogart's, maybe 3 times at Bogart's.
And what would he do? Would he just kind of show up blitzed and just riff or answer questions or read or what?
The first time Grace Slick and Paul Kantner from Jefferson Airplane or Starship at that time came up and introduced him. There were all these celebrities there. He had a stool with a mic and a little table with a bottle of Chivas, and people would start throwing joints and acid, everything on the stage.
I can't stop laughing about the bottle of Chivas.
Yeah, he would pick up stuff. He would pick up stuff from the stage and put it in his mouth. He didn't even know what it was, And then he'd get off onto these trips, but then there were such moments of brilliance. Bill Stanky and I, and then my girlfriend at the time, Gail Shepard, she was an associate producer. We got a deal with Atlantic Records to do. It's sort of a collector's item now, but it's called Sound Bites from the Counterculture, with spoken word featuring on censorship featuring Hunter S. Thompson, Timothy Leary, Eugene McCarthy, Abbie Hoffman, Jello Biafra, Henry Rollins, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Hunter's opening to that, you have to listen to it like 2-3 times to really understand it. But what he says is brilliant. I mean, it's like it happened. He talked about the future, and it freaking happened, with Trump, all that kind of stuff. So
mm-hmm.
It's like he predicted the future. Brilliant, man.
Oh, interesting.
I can go on forever talking about him, and we weren't even like best friends. It's just, I was so influenced by him.
It's interesting because you kind of have your feet in 2 different worlds. One is this kind of counterculture, punk, alternative, very just counter to whatever's going on. It's counter. Mm-hmm. And then to be a cop is literally the opposite. You're defending law and order and the way normalcy.
Yeah, I think that's what made me really good at. You don't like to really call it interrogation anymore, but I would debrief hundreds of prisoners through the Department of Justice. Where I said, I got with an assistant U.S. attorney and said, I knew so much about burglars and addicted to substance, so they had, they didn't have their jobs. So they had to break into homes or whatever because a laptop was worth like $1.50 at a fence or whatever at a crack house. So I knew those guys had their ear to the street, to the curb. Mm-hmm. They knew everything. They knew who shot who at such and such corner. They knew where all the drugs could be bought. They knew everything. So I made an arrangement through an assistant U.S. attorney that any burglar that gets locked up that is willing to debrief with his defense attorney or her defense attorney present, we'd be willing to do that. And it got to a point where they had to be honest and give up everything. And you'd have to convince them that, there's no judge in their right mind that is going to sentence you for 2 lifetimes for committing 200 burglaries. You're going to probably end up getting a deal and maybe 1, 2, 3 burglaries and do a bit of time.
Mm-hmm. And it helps if you give up some information.
But it helps if you give up some information, because there have been guys that have totally walked, that have worked with me, that got out. But then
totally walked. So did something where maybe they would have gotten 10 years in prison,
but
and they walked.
Their face came back. No, but then the problem with crack, and I have a real problem with prisons, and there's no prison reform, and housing people that do nonviolent crimes and are addicted to something like that. They don't get the help they need. And it's not only inside, but they need to have sometimes lifelong help when they get outside, and they don't have it. And so what happens inevitably, and I'm serious, 99.9% of the time, a guy gets out, goes in for a while you're working out the deal, and if you end up doing crack inside and you don't have money, you're going to owe something you don't want to owe. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them stop and they come out healthy, and but then a trigger happens, a certain trigger, and they're right back on it. And once they start smoking, they don't stop. And I've had guys with $1,000 a day habit, and imagine how many homes they have to break into for that.
Yeah,
I think the most I've closed on one guy was probably 500 burglaries. One guy.
That's crazy.
In a year period. Yeah.
The funny thing is
that's a huge operation. Yeah. It led to Russian organized crime. It led to simple crack houses. It led to a huge operation that involved Secret Service and other federal things, because it led to a sensitive Middle Eastern country where stuff was being sent. Mm-hmm. Sensitive technology. Which sensitive technology at that time was an Xbox, PlayStation, laptops. Because they could Al Qaeda could use stuff like that. And so those were the type of investigations I got into. And I'm telling you, I wish I could write about it, but I can't. I can tell you about it, but I can't be specific.
Right.
But I think the Washington Post, I can tell you about this because it was a paragraph, but it was a 2-year investigation about how the Secret Service Washington field office was breached with no sign of forced entry, and several sensitive laptops with presidential movement and all that kind of stuff were stolen. And it was this guy, and they got involved with me on this investigation. It was a blast.
So it was a guy who was addicted to drugs and was just trying to make
it. And
he
found a certain fence, and all they wanted was, hey, turn the laptop over like this one where you got, and if it says has a barcode that says U.S. government, get us those.
Wait, that's a fascinating way to commit espionage, though, right? You're basically using, you're using people who are addicted to drugs and are breaking into homes anyway. It'd be very difficult.
Well, when they were working with us, they were monitored. I hope that didn't happen when they were out, but so many. Then they had to do weekly piss tests, and they were very closely monitored.
But even
you couldn't send them in someplace with a bracelet, or ankle thing. But they had certain devices on them, so we knew and could hear and see everything that was happening.
But even before you guys would have known about them, right? The fact that someone was willing to pay more money for a U.S. government laptop,
mm-hmm.
right? Some foreign power is just sort of like, hey, well, we'll put a net out there and just sort of see what falls in it. We'll buy up all these laptops, and
Yeah.
instead of getting $150, we'll pay you $500 or something.
Yeah,
And
we took that
you
place
just kind of
over.
put out the net and see what you get. I mean, you might get a
No, not
lot.
500. Yeah, not 500. I mean, maybe 150, 200.
Yeah.
But if you're getting 8 of those a day, that's good. That's will support a habit.
Yeah.
And then you end up liking these guys, and I think that's what I was getting into is like my background in counterculture and all that kind of stuff. I think really helped, and with me being able to find something that I can associate with them about, and, some commonality, and empathy or whatever. And but I've like debriefed like rapists and murderers and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to like them, but you have to. You don't like them, but you have to like be real even keeled and like try to be understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But so I got very good at it and loved it. I mean, I think that was my favorite part of police work was being in the box and interviewing them and just talking to these guys and learning everything about crime, how they pick victims, how everything.
And it's interesting. So you found the burglars to be far more sympathetic than, I mean, no one's going to find a rapist sympathetic. That's basically the one crime there's never any justification for ever.
Pedophiles and rapists. Yeah. No.
But what about other? Did you find that the burglars were more likable than the other violent offenders, excluding the rapists and people like that?
A lot of the burglars came from good homes. They just got caught up in crack, or there was no meth in D.C. There probably it was at the time, but crack hit D.C. around '86. They took over the street, and it was primarily crack and heroin, PCP, and but it took them over, and they lost everything. They lost their jobs. They lost their family. And a lot of them came from very good positions and good families, and they were very smart. Some of them were just street people, uneducated, and still sympathetic. But it was the drug, and there, you can easily get help, and a lot of them don't want to be that way. I found a lot of them want to stop; they don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're chasing always the first high. It's never the same after that first experience where you smoke it or shoot it, so they're always chasing that first experience, and they'll never get it. And that's what I found most interesting.
When you look at, I want to return to your writing. I only have you for a few more minutes. When you, so you've written 5 novels. What is it that you want at the end of the writing journey?
You mean when I die?
Yeah, but at the end of all this, you've done all these books. You've put in a huge amount of labor. What is it? What is it at the end of this that you want?
Same thing you want, to write that novel that is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I want to write literary crime fiction. I want to try to. I want to. I'm not demeaning any other kinds of crime fiction. I don't mean it that way. But like all writers, I mean, you want your next book to be that book.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily breaks. Second Girl did very well. I mean, it broke. But just were, and I'm not talking about making social statements and all this kind of stuff, but just something that just really means something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my goal is. And I don't know if I can achieve that, but I'm going to keep trying until the day I die. I don't think I'd ever write a novel. The City on the Edge, which was my last book, was sort of a coming of age thing of me, not me, a fictional character based on my life experiences as a kid in Beirut during the Civil War, and pre-Civil War. and I added in a mystery, a murder, because that's what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it pissed off so many people. The Post loved it. Critics loved it. But my fans just were so upset.
Why were they so
They
upset?
wanted Frank Marr. Huh?
Oh, they wanted Frank Marr.
Yeah, and they said coming of age. What is this? I mean, so. But I had to write it. So I'm done with anything semi-autobiographical.
Oh, interesting. Well, I know you.
But then, when we write, and I'm sure you could say the same thing. When we write, there's a lot of us that is in the writing of us in a character. I'm not Frank Marr, but there are parts of him that is me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I really only write about myself. So all the characters are versions of me.
Yeah,
like the bad guy, exactly. And the bad guy, I would never have the bad guy say anything that I don't largely agree with, or at least somewhat agree with.
That's interesting. Yeah,
but
because there are things that I don't agree with that is said, but I'll allow it. But would I ever do it? No.
I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't want to do any of that.
No, I wouldn't want to do it. But I mean, if I could get away with certain things Frank did, not hurting people, but not doing drugs, but busting into drug boys' homes and flushing their stuff down the toilet, that would be so much fun. But am I going to do something like that? No, not in a million years.
Yeah, I mean, I love chaos.
I'll get caught. Me too.
I love chaos, but I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't think I have the right to hurt anybody. But I would love to, crash cars and, just burn the thing down and all that stuff. I love that. But I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't think I have the right. So
yeah, Frank hurt people, but he didn't kill them. One was an accident, and actually Josh said, "Does he have to be a murderer?" Because he originally in the first draft did kill him, and I said, "You know what? No, he doesn't." That's the thing about Josh, and I know you know Josh, and because he was your editor on your first book.
Kind of. Another editor there bought the book, and then he left.
That's right. He's now at Grand Central.
I think so, something like that.
Yeah, he's an incredible editor.
And so I got and so then he said, "I'm going to kick you over to Josh and someone else." And then I wound up working with the other person. I didn't wind up working with Josh. Okay. But I knew him. I met with him a bunch of times, and we hung out at BoucherCon.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and he's like the kind of guy that, like, I told him, I said, I die with an unfinished book halfway through or quarter way through. I know you can finish.
That's actually one of my biggest fears. Is that I'm curious if you have the same fear, which is when you finished a book but you haven't finished rewriting it. I'm terrified of stepping in front of a bus and dying, and having people get the manuscript that I've been working on for a year or 2 years or whatever it is, and just reading it, and it could be good. It just needs, maybe 50 hours more of work of rewriting, or 100 hours more of rewriting. But they just look at it and they're like, "Oh, this is shit. No, just nothing. Just throw it."
And you're dead.
Oh,
That'd be terrible.
This is garbage. He didn't have it. He lost
but
it.
But you won't know.
Yeah, and they have no idea that actually it's brilliant. It just need me to work at it, and there's no one else. Really, there's no one else who can write your stuff.
I have a relationship with Josh. I really believe he could.
Okay, well, maybe
I'm not kidding.
That's rare, though. That's very rare. I don't think anyone could finish my books.
Just I mean, I don't know if he would do it, but yeah, I worry about that too. I worry about that, and not finishing something.
Well, you just have to you have to put it out on Twitter. I want Josh to finish my book if anything happens to me, so that there's this social pressure on him if something happens to you to get it done.
Yeah, I actually should do that. I don't know. I emailed it to him, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I could." He goes, "But God forbid that would happen." So,
you guys seem really tight. I've seen you guys hanging out, and you guys seemed like the way you want an author and an editor to be. Yeah. You guys were hanging out and yucking it up.
Oh, trust me, if my book sucks, this new one, I'm going to hear it.
Oh,
I mean, obviously, David, this sucks.
Right.
Or you need to do this, or no, this is we have to do this or this or this. You have to.
Do you hate being edited?
No, not by him. No, I hated being edited by one of my first agents. Not going to mention the name,
Mm-hmm.
but a very, very big agent. Not the one I'm with now. I love Deborah Schneider. I love her. But that I did hate because there were things that they didn't understand. I know that's not a problem, but they didn't understand that it was, and they were not a they then. But it just didn't work for me. And it didn't last.
But even with Josh, don't you hate getting edited a little bit? I mean, I hate it.
No.
Like I'll get something back from my wife, and I'll hate her for a day because she didn't get
That's
something.
Different. That's different. And I didn't hate my wife when she didn't, like something or anything. I would just disagree. But there was things she said that I said, that's right. Or like her mom was my initial
some of it's
editor.
good. Yeah, a lot of it's really good. My wife is one of my best editors, but it drives me nuts sometimes. Yeah, I remember the first time she read something of mine and she didn't like it, and I went to the grocery store and I was like, I'm really taking it really well, and I was like, but I'm gonna miss Lindsay. But I couldn't admit it, but I was furious about it. But she's great. Yeah. But sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
No, I remember my ex-wife's mother, who I love dearly, was a college professor. English, so she was like my second reader, and she told me something that will always stick. She goes, David, your commas are like dandruff on a page. And I didn't get pissed off, but I said, no, they're not. No. But then they really were, so that helped.
Do you find that the comments that your reviews, do you ever get anything good out of your reviews, like on Amazon review? Do you ever? You don't even look at them.
No,
I look at mine.
I can't help but look at them, of
course. Right, exactly.
Exactly.
I don't look at them either, but I do.
I know, and those 1 stars and whatever, they're inevitable. City on Edge didn't even really get reviewed. I don't get many reviews on Amazon. You get thousands of reviews on Goodreads and stuff.
Yeah, you get a lot on Goodreads, a ton.
Yeah,
I think you have 2,000 reviews or something. That's a lot.
Yeah, I don't understand why Amazon. I don't, because I sell a lot of Kindles and it's on Barnes and Noble, Apple, all my books and all that. But I can't. Second Grill did very well on Kindles, and but no one reviews.
Yeah. But it's funny. I know.
I see these. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was saying I have friends, who like get thousands of reviews. I mean, are doing so well. I'm very happy for them. I mean, I love Sean Cosby to death. Razorback, Razor Tears. I hope and Gabino Iglesias just finished his book, The Devil Takes You Home, and he's getting some really mixed reviews on Amazon that are tearing him up, but he's getting critical praise on NPR, the New York Times, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The Vanity Fair, I mean, everything. And but his book is so dark, but it's beautifully dark. I mean, it's like literary crime fiction that is just dark and beautiful. And I love dark books.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Marr is not dark like his. So I think people just got upset that it was so dark.
Interesting.
I mean, but he has a fan base. He has a huge fan base, and the book is doing very well. I mean, obviously because of the good reviews he is getting. But I know it upsets, writers to be.
Have you ever gotten a review where it really kind of devastated you, where you were like, oh my God, this person really, they got me, and I'm upset now. Like, I think the book isn't as good because of what they said.
Well, I got called a racist.
But you and I both know you're not a racist. So
I'm not.
so
I'm far from. I'm far from.
that's some bullshit.
Yeah.
That's just
But it
that's
was
just
like,
bullshit.
I never, in any of the Marr series, I never mentioned race or color of skin. Frank Marr could be black, with an Irish name. But I mean, in the new book, the CI could be white or black, the confidential informant.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Blum is obviously Jewish, but his partner Kelly, she could be African American or Hispanic. So I never mention race, but there's a certain way of talking on the street, and you can be white, black, Hispanic. A lot of them have that street talk,
Mm-hmm.
and I think because I did that kind of street talk, people assumed, a couple of people, not me, that, this is this white guy writing, about these characters, and it's just, they got racial out of it for some reason. I don't understand it. I don't understand how any of the Marr books could even, well, he did get brutal with some guys, but,
I mean, I don't get how anyone could see that, how any sane person could read any of that into it. That's just some crazy bullshit.
Yeah, so that was the only thing that just really, really hit me, because I'm the furthest thing from, from racist, or anything like that. And I'm very concerned, just like everybody else, about some of these beatings and shootings. But then again, I have to admit, I'm not in that officer's shoes, so I don't know. It is up to the department and the prosecution to determine whether it was justified or unjustified, and many of them were unjustified.
Mm-hmm.
And that tears me up, Not for them, I don't feel bad for them, but it tears me up that it happened, a life was lost. So yeah, that I agree with, So that's the only thing.
Okay. It's funny because I found with the reviews, I've always, when I first had books published, I was really worried there'd be some review that would just devastate me, and it never happened. I find that people give it 1 star or whatever, but it's usually because we don't see eye to eye on really anything. And so,
generally, that's what it's like most.
And so it's like, it doesn't really matter. I see, to me, orange looks like this, and to you, orange looks like that.
Yeah.
And, so what's there really to talk about?
Yeah. A lot of the 1-star reviews I got were very, just not my type of book. I don't like a character that, uses drugs like that.
Yeah.
Well, read the third book. It's a trilogy. There's, it's sort of like the arc is the middle love. He does find redemption. But I can agree with that if someone doesn't like a character like that, but they're not calling him racist or something.
Yeah.
I mean, the Washington Post reviewed City on Edge and said something very weird to me, not to me, the book was beautiful. I just recently learned that the guy that reviewed it passed away recently. And at the end, he said that it reminded him of Tchaikovsky. What?
What did that mean?
Tchaikovsky is, obviously was a Russian storyteller, playwright. I've read some of his stuff, and I think it was more because of the cinematic. He was very, the landscape was a personality, and it was all very cinematic and visual. And I think that was the comparison he was making. He did actually say that it was cinematic.
Oh, interesting.
So,
very well. That's great. That's a very powerful.
Oh yeah, no, that blew me away. I mean,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't agree with it, but it's not. I'm not trying to be humble or anything. I just don't. I mean, and also I loved. That Marilyn Stasio at New York Times reviewed every Frank Marr book. She just really liked Frank Marr, and that was very rare. She's no longer at the Times, and so that was beautiful. But I've gotten some unfavorable blog reviews, but in general, all the papers and blogs and trades. Because you know how important trades are.
Mm-hmm.
We're very positive, with the exception of one time, Curtis. But
they can be kind of snarky.
Yeah,
that's good though. But so I agreed to keep this, not make this too long. You just finished, just for everyone at home, you just finished a book that you've been working on for 2 years, and you literally just finished a draft of it. And
mm-hmm.
So I want to honor that I'm not. You were going to give me 45 minutes. You've given me an hour, and we agreed. If we have spillover, we'll do other episodes. But I think this is a good place to end. Dave, it's been great reconnecting with you. If you're ever up in Connecticut or New York City, please let me know. I'd love to grab a beer together or something.
How far are you from New York?
I'm about 45 minutes outside it.
Really? I might be there this Saturday through Tuesday.
Let me know.
I will.
Ping me. I'd love to see you. I have 3 kids. My wife and I had too many children, and it's I my childcare responsibilities are substantial. But if you're up in New York, you might get me out of them.
Okay. Well,
I'd love that.
It's going to be one of those things where I'm making a decision today.
Okay.
And to get the tickets, because I obviously want to see Josh, and there's a friend I really want to see there. A couple friends of my cousin. I have several cousins there. I want to see. I'd like to hook up with my cousin. And it's not like a business thing. It's just finishing a book and just wanting to go to New York. But, it's one of those kind of things where I can just like take the train or whatever and just like decide at the last minute. So I'll let you know. That'd be fun.
All right. Well, if you bring the grapefruit, I'll bring the Chevis.
I know some good Scotch whiskey. Chevis is great.
All right, Dave.
I would never turn that down.
It means a lot to me to have you.
To me
on
too,
here.
Scott.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.